say fear has no place in the ring, that every fighter, no matter the odds, must confront his enemy face to face. But what happens when fear isn't coming from the underdog, when it radiates from champions? What if one man, alone in the ring, was so brutally dominant, so relentless in his pursuit of destruction, that even the most decorated names in the sport found excuses to look the other way? That man is David Benavidez, the undefeated Mexican monster who turned rejection into reputation, and silence from his rivals into screams from the crowd. Before, he was the boogeyman of the super middleweight division. Before Tyson crowned him with praise and Canelo Alvarez ducked his challenge like a matador, avoiding the horns, David Benavidez was just a boy with a dream and a weight problem. Born in 1996, David wasn't the picture of a future champion. By his early teens, he had ballooned in size, tipping the scales at nearly 250 pounds, far from the lean and lethal warrior he'd later become. His childhood nickname, the New Butterbean, wasn't flattering, it was a jab. But where others saw mockery, David saw a starting line. What followed were 2 grueling years of transformation, not just of body, but of mind. By 17, Benavidez wasn't a chubby kid anymore, he was a weapon in human form. His early fights weren't just victories, they were statements. Within just 2 years of turning pro, his name rang across the boxing world. He didn't just beat his opponents, he devoured them. There was blood in the water, and the division was beginning to notice, but notice wasn't enough. If David wanted the world title, he'd have to go through Romer Alexis Angulo, a man known not just for his durability but for his composure under fire. The sportsbooks didn't give Benavidez a real shot. Too young, too raw, too early. But in the ring, none of that mattered. From the first bell, Benavidez fought with the patience of a seasoned predator. He absorbed Angulo's experience, calculated the rhythm, then cracked the code. For every punch Angulo landed, Benavidez returned 10, and when the momentum shifted, it was like a dam breaking. Angulo, usually unshakable, was dropped to his knees. Still he rose, but what followed was a masterclass in annihilation. Benavidez wasn't just hunting a win, he was making a point. From there, David set his eyes on the final gatekeeper standing. Between him and destiny, Ronald Gavril, a Romanian warrior with 18 wins and only 1 loss. Gavril was battle-hardened and sharp. Benavidez knew this would be no walkover, and the ring quickly proved him right. From the opening bell, it was chaos. Benavidez came out firing, slicing Gavril with youth and aggression. But the Romanian absorbed every hit like a vampire drinking pain. Then he came alive. For the first time in his career, Benavidez tasted the canvas. The crowd gasped. The commentators stuttered. The young phenom had been dropped, but Gavril had made a mistake. He hadn't finished the job. That knockdown lit a fire in Benavidez that no water could douse. What followed was a war of attrition. Punches flew like shrapnel. The air was thick with sweat and adrenaline. In the end, it was a split decision. The margins were razor thin, but David had done enough. At just 20 years old, David Benavidez had become the youngest world champion in super middleweight history. With the belt around his waist, the Mexican monster didn't slow down. He accelerated. He tore through the division like a man possessed. And yet, amid the wreckage of former contenders, one name remained conspicuously absent: Canelo Alvarez. The undisputed king, the face of boxing, was nowhere to be found. When asked, Canelo brushed it off. What has he accomplished? He sneered, dismissing Benavidez with words instead of punches. But the subtext was clear. He didn't want the smoke. Not from this monster, but Benavidez didn't wait for invitations. If Canelo wouldn't step up, someone else would. That someone was David Lemieux, a former champion known as the Demolisher. The nickname didn't age well. From the opening bell, it was Lemieux who was getting demolished. Benavidez walked him down like a predator stalking an injured animal, each punch landing like a drumbeat of doom. By the 3rd round, the ref had seen enough. Lemieux was saved from further punishment, but the division had received a brutal reminder. Benavidez wasn't slowing down. The victory gave him more than just another highlight reel. It gave him the validation to call himself what the world had already begun to whisper: the Mexican monster. And now, the monster wanted more. Next on his list was Caleb Plant, a slick, strategic fighter with a silver tongue and an iron will. Their pre-fight tension was volcanic. Benavidez seethed with rage at press conferences, promising to tear Plant apart. But when the bell rang, it was Plant who came out composed. For 3 rounds, he danced, dodged, and jabbed, reading Benavidez like an open book. It looked like a masterclass in mental warfare, a trap that Benavidez had willingly stepped into, but the monster adapted. Midway through the fight, something shifted. The storm calmed. David's rage turned into rhythm. His eyes sharpened. His shots found their mark. And Plant, for all his agility, began to wilt. Round after round, Benavidez broke him down, turning the slick veteran into a living punching bag. Still, Plant refused to fall. He survived all 12 rounds, but just barely. When the final bell rang, there was no doubt who had won. Benavidez stood victorious once again, his record unblemished. But even that wasn't enough. The next name, Demetrius Andrade, a man who, like Benavidez, had danced with the devil of avoidance, undefeated, decorated, dangerous. This was the kind of fight that decided legacies. Two champions. 1-0 would have to go. The opening rounds told a grim story for Benavidez. Andrade was calm, technical, brilliant. He dissected the Mexican monster with precision, exploiting every angle, testing every weakness. For a moment, it looked like David's reign was on the edge of collapse. Observers whispered, was this it? Was this the fight? Primal surged through Benavidez. With fists full of fury and lungs full of fire, he launched a 30-second assault that shook the arena. Andrade, once surgical and sharp, found himself swallowed by the storm. He tried to recover, but the damage had been done. The pressure, the power, the sheer will of Benavidez was too much. Andrade never made it past the sixth. Another undefeated champion had been chewed up and left in the past. And as David Benavidez stood tall, his arms raised in yet another display of dominance, even his critics had to admit the Mexican monster wasn't a myth. He was real, he was dangerous, and he was coming for everyone, including, hopefully, Canelo. The question now isn't whether David Benavidez deserves a shot at Alvarez, it's whether Canelo can afford to keep running. The boxing world waits, watches, and wonders. How long? Can the king avoid the monster at his gate? If you think it's time for Benavidez versus Canelo, smash that like button and drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe Alvarez is dodging the biggest challenge of his career? Or is Benavidez still one fight away from proving he's the top dog? Subscribe for more fight stories, breakdowns, and deep dives into the world of boxing's most electrifying warriors. The monster isn't done, and neither are we.